Welcome everyone for the first interview of VaeZine's In the Spotlight, a quarterly fan-based magazine, zine, that a couple of friends of mine and I created together with Thomas Bailey, Jonelle Hippol, and myself, David Wortman. And we thought, while creating this, to enhance a bit the experience of this fantastic Vaesen RPG system and expand the game plan, but also give a bit more to the community back and share the expansion of it in itself. And so today, in our first live interview, I have with me probably the all-seeing all-father of Vaesen, Johan Egerkrans. Hello, Johan.
The Grandmaster. Hello. Hi, David. How are you?
Good, I'm good. And yeah, Johan, you are the artist and creator of Vaesen. I think there's not much to be said about that, but can you give us a bit of who you are and what kind of brought you into the world of Vaesen?
Well, I'm a Swedish illustrator and writer. I've been, basically drawing all my life since I was 2 years old or something like that. But let's skip skipping up to 10-ish. I discovered role-playing games with the classic Drakar, the Swedish fantasy role-playing game that everybody sort of started with here, coming out now soon from Free League as Dragonbane in English. But that was my that's what I blooded my tooth on role-playing games, so to speak. And from that day on, I always wanted to illustrate role-playing games. So I started doing that. It turned out a few of my friends from school were actually working for Target Games, who produced Dragonbane, Drakar, and Mutant, and all those Swedish Cult, and all those classic Swedish role-playing games that are sort of having a revival now. So I started working for them when I was just after high school. When I was 18, 19, thereabouts. So I started working for a small company called Cell that produced a game called Gemini. It was a dark fantasy game, sort of where a fantasy role play meets Marilyn Manson. Something like that. Very sort of dark and goth, very grim dark. As was the ideal in the late 90s, early 2000s. And they started up a computer game company as well called Idol. So after a while, I started working there as a concept artist. So that was my sort of introduction my introduction into the gaming world was Gemini. But my first proper job was being a concept artist. So that's what I worked with for like 10 years or something like that in the Swedish computer gaming industry. And I sort of, after a while, I sort of started to slowly saunter towards publishing. I started doing children's books. And did a lot of children's books. I illustrated children's books, did a lot of covers and all that stuff. But I didn't write myself. But my editor, after a while, started to push me into, you can write. Okay. Shouldn't you write something yourself? Something, just write and illustrate a book. And I sort of wrecked my brain trying to come up with something that I actually would like to write about. And I sort of realized I didn't want to do fiction. So that left some sort of pop science, some sort of fact book of some sort. And then I got inspired by the old monster manuals from my role-playing days. How I love sort of flipping through the monster manuals and reading about all these cool monsters. And then I started thinking about, there's a English book that came out, a British book that came out in the late 70s called Faeries by Alan Lee and Brian Froud. It's probably familiar to most people who played Vaesen. And I sort of think that's a bit like a monster manual, isn't it? only it's about folklore beings instead of folkloric beings instead of sort of made up monsters, even though many fantasy monsters are based on folklore monsters. But you know what I mean. And there's no stats, but
Exactly.
But there's no. But it shared some similarities, and then I started thinking about maybe I could do something like that about Swedish or Scandinavian folklore beings. So that's what I did. So that became the book Vaesen, or Nordiska Väsen, that came out exactly 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not a role-playing game. That's just a book about Scandinavian folklore.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's sort of blurred out.
Yeah.
but now you can see it. So yeah, that became Vaesen. So that came out 10 years ago, and rather quickly I got contacted by the Free League, who had just been they was just starting up. They had just produced their first take on Mutant or Mutant Year Zero, and they were like, I think this could work as a role playing game. So we started discussing that, and it took us a few years to get it done. But then eventually the game came out. I don't remember when the game came out. Was it
15? I think, if I'm
15 or 7 or 16.
Something on that, depending on which region.
16, I think.
It could be 16.
Yeah. But after a while, we sort of got that going. I think it was later. I think it was.
Was it
2017? Yeah. It took us a few years to get it done. I mean, they produce so much stuff. They got so much on the plate. But so then it became a role-playing game. So the book, inspired by role-playing games, became sort of a monster manual for the role-playing game based on itself. So it's gone full circle a few times. And that's sort of what I do now. That's my but that's the story of Vaesen. But my trajectory has been like the Vaesen book became really popular, especially in Sweden, but also internationally, and we produced it in English and Swedish fairly quickly, and that's sort of become that's what I do now. I followed Vaesen with Norse Gods. It came out in 2016, and has also been a huge success.
Oh yeah.
And then I followed that up with the Undead, and then Dragons. Then I did a lot of books about dinosaurs, and to sort of as a palette cleanser.
As a palette cleanser.
Palette cleanser. Not palette cleanser, palette cleanser. But that's what I do now. I do these sort of illustrated pop science books about stuff I like. and the stuff I like is the stuff I liked as a 10-year-old.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it's still sort of what I like these days. So it's monsters and dinosaurs.
and probably also
folklore.
Yeah, probably now in the family, kind of giving over to the next generation as well, as a good kind of consortium of your stories that you liked as a child.
Yeah. And that's the general idea, to sort of inspire kids similar to me at that age, some fellow nerdy kids who like cool stuff.
Fantastic. When it comes to Vaesen, was there anything particular or a creature, a Vaesen in itself, that kind of immediately kind of caught your attention before you even started to outline, like, I want to fully focus on this? Where, like, was there something that was like, you know what, I think about this creature and I want to do more about them?
No, not really. Not that I want to do like gnomes, something like that, like the book of Bettar, or the book of trolls, or the book of Skogsrån, or whatever. No, not that I want to do a feature book on a particular what do you call it, race, or
Class,
strands,
okay.
class of beings. No, not really, not like that. I'm more interested in sort of a broader perspective.
Okay.
I mean, I did in a way with the undead, because the undead are so similar.
Yeah,
all over the world. So I did that, and I mean, I obviously I did on dragons.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I did. But but it's not just about Scandinavian dragons. Then I sort of broaden the perspective and take a more. So that's sort of what either you sort of focus on one region and try to fit in everything that fits within that region, like Nordiska Väsen or Vaesen or Norse gods, when I sort of tackled the whole mythology of Scandinavia, or I do a more global, wider perspective while I sort of focus on one group of folkloric or mythical beings. But it's hard to do every folkloric being in the world.
Absolutely.
In the world.
Is there a favorite Vaesen that you like personally, just either of characteristics or just of history?
The standard answer is the Night Raven, the Natteravn, because I really like drawing ravens. Okay. Like a monster ghost raven. I mean, doesn't get much better than that. And then, of course, dragons. I mean, they're in every mythology, but they are folkloric creatures in Scandinavia as well. We used to actually believe in dragons. There's a lot of tales, lots of what's it called? Stories about dragons. And I think in the Swedish folklore stories, they usually fly backwards because sort of they work like jet engines, you know. Or the fire comes out from the other end. So.
I see. Okay.
So they sort of fly in the right direction, but also through some sort of jet propulsion.
Cool. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, it's often left out for some reason. There's often this silly when you look at the actual folklore. There's often this sort of rather silly characteristics and silly twists that you aren't aware of, because everything has been sort of made cool by Hollywood or modern storytelling. But there's a lot of. I think my favorite detail is the werewolf, the Swedish Scandinavian werewolf. They were always three-legged in wolf form.
Okay.
Because the sort of the front the arms became the front legs, and then you got sort of 3 digits on the back end because you got the 2 legs and the tail. So one of the legs became the tail, and then you only had 1 leg left. So they're 3-legged with a tail. Which is stupid. but it's a really funny sort of detail. There's always some sort of logic behind it, but it's also not.
Yeah, I mean, cool. A lot of historic kind of word-to-mouth translation of these stories that kind of continuously went over centuries. To certainly change these folkloric aspects of it.
Yeah, and people have added their own sort of humor to them. Exactly. I mean, there's so much stuff going on there. But no, that's an interesting fact. We're still to bring that into Vaesen. I mean, I write about it in my book, but it's not. I haven't illustrated the werewolf that way because that's very cool. I probably should. I probably should embrace that a bit more. The inherent silliness of it.
Yeah. I think when you speak of illustrations, one thing that especially the Western RPGs community kind of appreciates very much are your illustrations, this unique style of sketches, watercolors, and yet some digital refined art. Can you give us a bit of an idea about what your artistic process here is when you create the illustrations for Vaesen? Do you have any specific kind of approach for it or something?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's the style is sort of inspired by golden age illustrators like John Bauer, of course, from Sweden, but also Arthur Rackham from England, and Dulac, Kai Nielsen, Kittelsen, all those guys. There's a lot of interesting illustrators from that age, from that era, like 100 years ago, basically. That I took a lot of inspiration from. And then I sort of mixed that with the comic book artists I grew up with, like Mike Mignola and Simon Bisley and all those guys. That sort of were my contemporaries, or the ones I grew up with. So I tried to strike a balance between those two, the old and the new, in my style. And sometimes it sort of wears to the golden age style, and sometimes it wears to a more, I mean, my natural style is really sort of with sharp edges and really sort of sketchy and scratchy, and sort of there's no smooth round lines anywhere. Everything's like just like angles. It's very angular. So but the process it's pretty straightforward. I draw everything on paper. Sorry, now there's an ambulance.
I actually can't hear it.
Oh, okay. So the process is fairly simple, but not. But as everything is when we sort of look at it. But no, I draw everything in pencils on paper, just regular copying paper, A4 paper, with of a higher grade, so it's like 120 gram paper, so it's a bit better than those sort of standard copying paper, but it's still there's nothing sort of special fancy about it. It's not like Bristol board or stuff like that. It's copying paper. So I draw it with just using a pencil and an eraser, and then I scan it into the computer and I color everything in Photoshop. So there's no watercolors involved at all.
Oh, okay.
But I use a lot of, I've produced like a library of watercolor textures that I did myself.
Okay.
So I got like 10, 15 of them that I use all the time. And I sort of flip them and mask them in different ways, and put them in different kinds of layers and so on to get that sort of hand-painted feel. And then I got a lot of custom brushes in Photoshop that I use, that I created myself, like splatter effects and stuff. So everything I do, I try to get away from it feeling digital, which sort of I'm helped by actually when I grew up, when I started out, I did all this by hand. I mean, I know how to draw in watercolor and so on. I mean, I'm not born with a Wacom.
How long would you say it usually takes like one illustration for you?
That's a sort of how long is a rope kind of question. But usually 1 or 2 days. Okay. 3 at the most, usually. I'm fairly quick once I get going. And I've always been a fairly I always worked fast, and I try to keep it fast and loose. I don't want to get bogged down in details and sort of over render things. I don't like that style. I'm more Frazetta than Boris Vallejo, if you get my drift. So I don't want to.
I personally,
it shouldn't look nice. It's not supposed to look.
Nice. I personally like these kind of sketches in amongst the other fully illustrated ones, and it kind of just gives a bit. I mean, if you look at the role-playing game, it kind of gives the idea that it's something being created here, and it's kind of left to your imagination to finish it. And
I always preferred sketches to finished artwork myself, so that's right. Mix in as many as possible, and they're quicker to do. So
And
I mean,
I think
aspect as well.
I think one of my favorite sketches that you made is the carriage that just rides over like the countryside and disappears into nowhere. It's just so simplistic. It is so easy in a sense, but it's so imaginative for me because like I can see the world of Vaesen in my head, or when I create games in that sense, kind of develop over that carriage ride, and it's very fantastic. I think, yeah, one of my favorite sketches that you made.
Yeah, I like that one. I like with there's this sort of ominous tree in the foreground with
Exactly.
face in
With
the dark
owls or something. Yeah.
There's some ruins, sort of Caspar David Friedrich like ruins in the background. And
yeah,
it's very Dracula. It's very Borgo Pass.
I think that's this. You can interpret it as a sinister gothic horror, but you can also say, oh, it's just ruins and it's historical landscaping.
Yeah.
But yeah, where do you usually get your main source of inspiration? I mean, obviously folklore is often translated word to mouth, but like you have different ideas of books and various forms of illustrations, how these creatures look. What is your main source?
I mean, it is other interpretations of it. I mean, other illustrators, and then of course the stories themselves. Just what image sort of pops into mind for me when I read the stories. Because that's and there's always lots of sort of different opinions and different descriptions of them. So they're never sort of set. It's not like this is what a troll looks like. It's always different in every story. Every interpreter has their own take on them. So in the end, you have to sort of, well, one way is to draw many different trolls, which is what I did. But ultimately, you sort of have to come up with your own interpretation of what this is what I think it should look like. And it's not a definite. It's not the definite illustration of that. Yeah. No, exactly. But it's at least it's my take. It's my fairly informed take on what something should look like. But there's no right or wrong. That's sort of the beauty of it as well. And that's the beauty of the role-playing game, that it's very much something that people can just sort of, well, here it is, just pick it up and run with it. I mean, it's in your hands now. It's not, I don't have anything to do with it anymore. It's sort of, I mean, I do, but I really like that sort of, it's a sort of passing of the torch thing.
No.
When once people start playing the game, it's their take on the folklore. It's not. I've done my part, sort of, trying to set a mood, but then people can do whatever they like with it. That's why I don't play Vaesen myself, because
I see.
I would never. I would be uncomfortable in playing it because I have so many opinions, and I don't have the fortitude to be the game master.
I see.
And as a player, I would have too many opinions. No, that's actually not. I try to keep it. I try to keep that at a distance.
Okay. I think you mentioned part of my next question already. What kind of role do you think art plays in setting the mood and tone for a tabletop game, for example, like Vaesen? I mean, you coming also from your background and playing games before. What do you think?
Well, I mean, a lot of the art in Vaesen, I mean, aren't produced as game art initially. I mean, it's produced for my books, but as the books themselves are sort of inspired by monster manuals and stuff like that, they work really well for a monster manual for Vaesen, because that's, I mean, so of course but the drawings I did specifically for the game, they're much more about setting the mood and much more about the human characters, and try to sort of incorporate them how does this sort of what's the feel of this fake 19th century, our take on the 19th century, our sort of Gothic Victorian world that sort of takes place somewhere in the 19th century, but it's very unspecified when, and you can sort of jump. We don't. From the beginning, we sort of talked about having the setting at a specific time, sort of 1850, like the middle of the 1800s.
Yeah.
But after it's not the real world. That's sort of not the point. So we just sort of try to keep it loose, and I think that's more fun, because then history nerds can come in and say, well, actually a typewriter was invented then, and actually that wasn't. It's like that doesn't matter. That's not the point.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to take inspiration from actual historical events, but you don't have to stick to a timeline.
Yeah, of course.
That's not what we're after. It's a mythical version of the 1800s. But I think the illustration. Sorry, I sort of got sidetracked. But the illustrations are the illustrations I produced for the game are very much about trying to sort of convey the sense of that world, and what the characters look like, and a lot of the inspiration, I think, was quite obvious. I was really inspired by partly old Gothic horror, like the Hammer films, that sort of, and the role-playing game Chill, which is all about sort of standing on a misty graveyard with a lantern in your hand and something's behind you. That's sort of feel like that sort of feel. And then what's it called? The TV series with Eva Green and Timothy Dalton. Bada bing, bada boom. Penny Dreadful.
Oh, Penny Dreadful, yeah.
That a lot of the inspiration for the sort of the style of the characters came from that one.
Interesting. Okay.
I really like that series. The costumes are so beautiful.
Yeah, I think
when I wanted to, but sort of that, but with a more. I try to look at what things look like in Sweden as well.
Yeah.
At that point, or Scandinavia at that point.
Yeah,
but
I
it's
think
still. I mean, it's Victorian, so
exactly
it looks basically similar in all of Europe.
Yeah, I think Penny Dreadful is also for me one of the shows that I started to rewatch just when starting to run Vaesen games, because it was like, yeah, as you said, it creates a good atmosphere. The costumes are amazing, and also a bit the mood is nice.
Yeah. It's probably a bit darker than
it's not the cozy horror. Yeah.
No, I mean, because I really think Vaesen should be sort of cozy horror.
Yeah.
But if you want it to be more sort of adult in the vein of Penny Dreadful, that's perfectly fine. But for me, it's a bit more fairy tale-ish in style. I guess. But that's. I mean, of course, Call of Cthulhu is also inspiration. That's sort of cozy horror to me.
Okay. True horror would then be cult or something.
Yeah, but there's something sort of
different.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's different, but that's sort of. I mean, that it's mystery based, and that's sort of very similar in one. And for me, Lovecraft is sort of cozy horror because I'm so used to it. And it's just
I see.
A warm blanket. It's a warm tentacle blanket.
Did you find anything specifically difficult or challenging when you started to create kind of these books that you found difficult to kind of translate or maybe incorporate even?
No, not really. It's hard to say. I mean, that's more about my limitations as an illustrator. I'm not a huge fan of large, complex scenes. So I mean, sort of illustrating a ball at the castle or something like that is not really my thing. There's too many characters, there's too much architecture, there's too much. That's not my style. I would try to find a sort of that's why I always fall back on Bauer and all those guys, because they had such a great way of simplifying things and just, okay, if we do a ballroom, then we do it just flat on sort of characters in profile, and then I could do it. But just doing a ballroom, I'm not Mobius, if you know that illustrator. I mean, who can draw basically anything. And knew what everything looked like, so we could. He had such a visual memory. I had to look up everything, but he sort of knew what a mid-1965 Ford looked like, and you could just draw it from memory because it's seen one on a picture once, and then it's just there, and knew what the motor looked like. And all. I mean, he's such a brilliant artist, and he's got such a sense of architecture and design and perspective and all that. It's just so easy for him. But I'm not that kind of illustrator, and I have to do some research and work things out. So large, complex illustrations aren't really my thing. I mean, people often think they're very detailed, but they're really not.
I was just thinking of your Ragnarok.
But it's a really simple illustration. If you look at it, you get the feel of a large war, but it's like 6 characters. It's a snake that sort of runs through the whole image, and then it's Thor, and then it's Odin and Fenris, and then it's Loki and Heimdall. Those are the only characters in the image, but it feels like a war is going on. It feels like a sort of a cover for a Warhammer. Warhammer box or something like that, which has like hundreds of characters, but it's really just 6 characters, and there's some Valkyries in the air that are really sketchy and off in the distance. But it's a really simple illustration if you actually think about it.
That's what I meant. Like it feels immense, but yet you created something simplistic that gives the feeling that when you look at it briefly, it's like, oh, there's a huge war.
But I don't have to draw the whole war. And that's sort of, I try to, when I do large scale stuff, I try to sort of find a way to work around. I mean, we always, when I was working as a concept artist, we always, what's the worst sort of prompt you can get as an artist, not as an AI, as an artist prompt, sort of draw this, and it's and then the standard for something really complex was 10,000 orcs on bikes in a turnpike. So you have to draw them from every angle, and like in full armor, so it's a lot of geometry on the armor as well. And then that's sort of that's my least favorite kind of illustration. When you get that sort of, then you have to find a workaround to actually just draw 1 orc or 2 on bikes, and then you go sort of, you can just hint the rest of them. Some artists just draw 1,000 orcs in a turnpike. Because they're insane.
I think the style that you have about this, as you described it, a simplistic yet complex design is so unique, and I think that's also one of the things. If you ask various people about like what do you like about Vaesen or the role-playing game or the books themselves, it's like immediately the illustration, the art is fantastic. It immediately drew me. It even brought me into the game because I saw these illustrations and I wanted to learn more about it, which in my case was the same. Saw a couple of images and I was like, this is fantastic, cozy art, and I really appreciate it. Well, trying to get a bit further maybe onto your other books as well, which would be, for example, the next one, Norse Gods, where you also show your extensive knowledge about the Nordic myth and mythology, beautifully kind of pulled together, and again, amazingly illustrated. How do you, or what was your kind of favorite Norse gods creation, or was the saga of creating Norse gods just again something for prosperity for your children, or was it a intended project that you wanted to do as a follow-up?
Oh yeah, it actually it was the first idea I had before I did Vaesen, but I felt a bit green, a bit too green to tackle take on the Norse myths as my first work. It felt a bit daunting, and it was quite daunting to do it even after doing Vaesen. It was probably it's the toughest book I've done, where I put the most pressure on myself. It's really hard to do. A lot of angst involved to get that finished. But I'm very happy with the result. It's very much my take on that whole mythology. But I mean, I read up on all the Norse myths. I mean, it's just get stuck in and start reading about it. I mean, one of the sort of it's quite an easy mythology to take on, as there are so few sources. You got the Eddas, you got Snorri's Edda, and you got the Poetic Edda.
Yep.
And that's it, basically. Then you got some runestones, which sort of depicts the myths, and you got Danish medieval historian called Saxo Grammaticus, who wrote some stories as well, but they're pretty boring to read, and they're very critical of the gods as well. He was very religious, so I mean, Snorri sort of, I mean, of course he was a Christian, but he wasn't that judgmental about the old religion when he wrote about it. He was quite sort of fair, as fair as you could be, writing in the 13th century. But Saxo, it's just not that much fun. So people sort of try to, when you want to do the whole mythology as a story, you always fall back on the Eddas, Snorri and the Poetic Edda. So that's pretty nice to have that. It's not that the amount of sources aren't that sprawling, even compared to Greek mythology, for instance, where you got lots of different writers who wrote different things, and they're contradictory and so on. I mean, all mythologies are contradictory anyway, and the Eddas sort of contradict themselves. But that sort of, at least you got that, and then it's more about sort of finding your tone. And then again, you always tend to get rather inspired by Snorri because he's really funny to read. He's got a wonderful sense of humor, a sort of dry, hard-boiled sense of humor, like all the old Icelandic sagas. They're really sort of, it's very hard-boiled, very, very sort of Hemingway-esque. It's very to the point, and there's always a sort of dark humor behind a sort of dark satirical humor, quite very sort of 2000 AD kind of feel to it. So it's a lot of fun writing about it. It's really fun adapting the stories and trying to sort of find your version of that dark wit, so to speak. And then it was but yeah, I read a lot of books, a lot of interpretations of the stories and academic texts.
Is there a specific favorite where you say I'm very proud about that section or that caricature or illustration?
It's hard to pick one. I mean, I really like. I mean, it's so boring, but I really like Odin and Loki. They are intriguing characters. They're both sort of tricksters, and they're both complete assholes.
Yeah, that's true.
and and they're very much alike as well. They're like mirrorverse. They're like different sides of the same coin in a way, and they are blood brothers. And that's sort of you really understand why Odin sort of got attracted to Loki, why he brought him in, because they are so similar.
Yeah,
he's probably the one who the only one in Asgard that really understands Odin. If you want to
psychoanalysis,
psychologify the stories, which I tried to refrain from as much as possible. But I don't know. I mean, they are really fun characters to tackle. I really like Skadi as well.
Oh, okay.
The giantess who comes to live with them, sort of a wilderness hunters, a bit sort of Diana-like.
Yeah, the hunter.
Yeah, exactly.
Huntress.
She's really cool, and I tried to convey that in my illustration. She looks like a punk who's been hitting the gym quite a lot. But it was a lot of fun. It was fun, but it was a tough book to do as well.
How long was the process until you were satisfied?
3 years.
Okay.
It was a 3-year process. So
and
it took me quite a while. And after that, I started doing the dinosaur books because I had to sort of take a break from these big mythical books.
Yeah. One of the things, since our next issue will be themed about the sea, and Nordic
the sea.
Exactly, and Nordic myth has quite a lot of references to the sea, obviously with monsters and creatures at Vaesen themselves, but also with the gods of sea. From the topic of sea, is there anything specific you like, or is there something that you want to highlight as a important aspect for either Vaesen or gods regarding the topic of sea, like Njord or?
I think. I mean, the gods of the sea. Njord is the god of the sea in one aspect, but it's more about the bounty aspect of the prosperity aspect. Like he's a Vanir, like Freya, and Freya is the father of Freya and Freya. But it's more about the surface and more about the sort of the humans. He's like he's a prosperity god. So it's more about the humans relationship to the sea. It doesn't represent the sea as such. While there are 2 other deities called Ran and Aegir. There are sea giants, and they're more about the sea itself. And Aegir Ran is really interesting. She's the queen of the sea. And she's the one who sort of pulls down people in nets and sort of wants to keep them at the bottom of the sea, and she drags down. She's really interested in gold as well. So she sort of drags down men and riches to the bottom of the sea in her net. She's a really interesting character. I think she'd work quite well in Vaesen as well, as a sort of Lovecraftian deity of the deep, so to speak, but still with a more Norse take on it. And I think you could sort of combine her with the Kraken, make some sort of nautical sea horror adventure history.
Yeah.
I mean, the Kraken, of course, is quite evocative as well, and also very sort of Lovecraftian.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't become more tentacled.
No, exactly.
No. But I mean, I do also appreciate the sea serpent to that aspect, because I mean, various stories of serpents being seen across the world, especially in that time when you look at kind of different newspaper articles where ships were being torn down by serpents or serpent-like creatures.
Yeah, and if you look at the original Vaesen book, as well as Norse Gods, I reuse a lot of illustrations from Olaus Magnus' History of the Nordic Peoples that came out in the 1500s. It was a sort of Catholic bishop who fled to Rome after the Reformation, after Sweden became Protestant. We had our sort of Gustav Vasa, who is our take on Henry VIII.
I see.
Who wanted to say, hey, these Catholic churches have a lot of gold. How about becoming Protestant? Then I can take one. So we had that. I think it's a 500th anniversary this year for Gustav Vasa as well. So he became regent 500 years ago. But it's very similar to Henry VIII. He didn't kill as many wives, but he still got that sort of, it's a Machiavellian asshole approach to governing to government. Anyway, that's but Olaus Magnus was a Swedish bishop, I think, and he fled to Rome, and he wrote a book called History of the Nordic Peoples. But he wrote it in Latin, but I don't remember the name. But in there's a lot of small illustrations. So in the Vaesen book, you got a lot of illustrations from that. They are nicked from History of the German Nordic people. But he also did one of the most famous things from that volume is the Carta Marina, which is this huge map over Northern Europe. Which everyone has seen, because every illustration of a sea monster from the 1500s that you ever seen is from that map. And that map hangs in Uppsala. The one of the two originals that remain. So I just went to visit it. It was so cool to see the actual physical map from the 1500s. It's from 1550, I think.
Yeah.
But you got all these sort of orcs and not like not Tolkien orcs, but there was a sea creature called an orc, and sea serpents and tentacle things and sea pigs and sea hogs and sea horses, and you got everything on that. It's just littered with all these cool sea monsters. So if you want to check out if you want some inspiration for cool sea monsters, check out Carta Marina. It's really cool, and it's the best map of Scandinavia from that era, the first and best map. It's quite, and it's quite interesting to just have a look. It's so detailed, and there's like small scenes everywhere. So like people riding reindeer and hunting, and
it's already the story there.
Most scholars 500 years ago, they took some liberties with reality. But
of course.
But it's really interesting. You check out that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good spawning ground for city monsters.
Just since we're kind of closing into the end, with your next book, The Undead, which is another fascinating collection of undead creatures. Personally, that's kind of more my métier, where it gets a bit more grim, more dark, more sinister,
more gothic,
more gothic. Especially, I'm from Eastern Europe, or live now in Eastern Europe, where these folk tales about vampires or other kind of undead creatures have kind of a very strong influence into society. Is there from that book maybe anything that you want to mention or say what kind of brought you to the idea of drawing a complete volume of those?
It's vampires. I mean, everybody loves vampires, and
That's true.
I wanted also to. I mean, in one way, sort of, I love the gothicness of the whole thing, and I mean, that's what I wanted to zoom in on, the classic Romanian, Greek, Eastern, sort of Central European vampire. They pop up in Germany and Holland and everywhere, but it's very sort of Central European thing. Romania and the Balkans. I wanted to do, sort of show what they actually were like in the actual folklore, because our view, the sort of movie vampire, is quite different from the actual folkloric vampire. And just the word vampire is very new. It's turned up in the 1700s or something.
Yeah.
Before that, you talk about revenants, talk about stuff like that. And those kind of, Strigoi. So that was my aim, to sort of debunk a few myths about the myths, so to speak. But also sort of just wallow in the whole gothicness of it all, and blood-sucking monsters from beyond the grave, that whole thing. And we'd really like to do a sort of gothic supplement for Vaesen, set in sort of Carpathia.
Which is fantastic indeed.
Yeah.
And I mean, then you even added the dragon book, the last.
And then we got the dragon.
So like, well, is there anything that we can expect maybe in the future, or other projects that you're working on expanding kind of that set of 4 books now to maybe 5 or 6?
Oh yeah. Somewhere along the line, we'll see something more in that style. I'm gonna take sort of a break at the moment. At the moment, I'm working on. I got a deadline this week on the sort of anniversary version of Vaesen, original book, because it's been 10 years. So we're doing a 10-year anniversary special edition thing. So with new Vaesen, and it's like 12 new Vaesen, I think. So it's going to be a bit. It's not a new volume. It's just adding on the old. So but the book is going to be a lot heftier. So it's going to be like 170 pages. So it's a bit fantastic. More tome-like. So I found some new interesting Vaesen. I also take up some folkloric characters that I sort of skipped the first time around, like the devil, who is such an integral part of folklore. But I sort of I wanted to, when I did Vaesen the first time, I wanted to stay away from everything that had to do with religion. But now I sort of realized that the religion is such a integral part of that agrarian society, so you can't sort of disentangle the two. So I got a chapter on the devil, got a chapter on witches. I bring that up in the new book.
Very much looking forward to that.
So I think it's going to be pretty cool. So that's coming out this fall in Swedish and English, and a few other languages. I think it's be out in German as well, pretty at the same time. And then after that, I don't know. I think I'm gonna do a book about cryptozoology, cryptids. That's gonna be the next book. Because I'm going back to monsters. I sort of realize I really like doing monsters, and that's also folkloric in a way. It's sort of modern folklore in a way. But I didn't want to do like Slenderman, all that stuff. But it's still like Loch Ness and all those cryptids are modern folklore in many respects. So I'm gonna have a look at cryptids from all over the world. So that I think is the next big thing, and then we'll see where I end up. I got a list of books I want to do, which is getting longer. I'm gonna be if I do all the books on that list, I'll be done when I'm 85, I think. So I got my work cut out for me. But I might do something about Greek mythology. Feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It would be there's so much I want to do. But I'm gonna do something on Greek mythology. But I'm just trying to find the right angle to do because I can't do everything.
Absolutely.
And a lot, if you just look at the stories about the gods, they're 50% of them is just about Zeus raping people, and that's not very much fun. So I tried to find an angle of attack that doesn't unrapey angle of attack. So it's probably going to be focusing more on the monsters and the heroes.
Oh, cool.
Rather than the gods.
Yeah.
Because that's a bit more interesting.
I agree. That seems like a good idea.
And then we'll see. There's like Japanese mythology. I'd love to do a book on yokai. Or Japanese folklore, I should say. Yokai is really... So I had a lot of fun with the yokai that are included in the undead. There's a few of them, like Yokiona, Gaki, the Peppo. But I really like to do a whole book about yokai, even though I don't speak Japanese and so on. So I have to find something.
Maybe some support on that.
Our co-work is some support.
Okay.
But I like to do that. There's so much stuff. I mean, that's 3 books in the future, so that's 6 or 7 years for me. So probably
fantastic
enough for now.
And then
I'm gonna work on the role-playing game, and I'm gonna work on Dragonbane as well, doing more stuff for that, because that's also really close to my heart.
Fantastic.
So I'm trying to keep busy.
That indeed sounds like. As a last question, is there any advice that you want to give maybe young aspiring artists who want to dabble in the same kind of field, or maybe try to do something similar and create their career of this?
Don't despair because of AI. Not that it's a fad, but it's just view it as a new source of inspiration, and just draw for your life. But that's the only way to get better. Just draw every day. Draw. Paint. Just do it, and just don't be afraid to take inspiration from other artists. That's how you learn tricks, how to sort of solve problems. It's actually by standing on the shoulders of giants and looking at how other people have solved it. There's nothing wrong in sort of looking at how someone else has solved a problem. Just looking at the world and trying to interpret it from the get-go is quite hard. But if you look at how someone sort of drew a wagon or whatever, it's much easier to look at how someone else has sort of solved the problem of drawing a stylized wagon, because everything we draw is stylized. You can't draw a reality, then you would draw like individual atoms, and you can't. So no illustration is realistic, because you can't draw reality. So everything is about stylizing up to some extent, and looking at how other people have solved those problems is a really great way of getting better. Not copying other people, but looking at how they solved it, they stylized things. So that's a really good, and just trying to imitate other people's styles. That's a really good way of getting better at yourself and finding your own style.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. I think a lot of artists do that, trying to copy. Oh, it's my favorite illustrator. How does Mike Mignola's style work, or how does John Bauer's style work, or
Mm-hmm.
Simon Bissell's style? And if you can sort of mimic that, then you can pick the things you like from that style and leave the rest, and then go on and create your own style. So
Mm-hmm.
my style is a mix of all influences and sort of soaked up over the years. Yeah, and get it out there. Get an Instagram account and put up your stuff. And try to follow other people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Johan, for that fantastic
Thank you,
hour,
David.
and looking forward to maybe be in contact soon for any more revelations of the beautiful mind of Johan Egerkrans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and good luck with VaeZine and all that stuff.
Thank you very
much. So cool that there's a convention.